picking up the pace for the noughties. It's 2005, the midpoint of the decade, but the end point of all Rodo. Yep, my band, we called it a day at the very end of this year, playing our final gig at a Wombat Club night on the 16th of December, supporting Magoo. Not acrimonious in any way. We all had other things going on in our lives, partners, contemplating kids, grown-up stuff, you know. Pretty much 7 years, a lot of fun, great memories, lasting friendships, no regrets. One notable memory stroke regret from this year was All Tomorrow's Parties, curated by Slint. Our third trip to ATP, this one was absolutely unmissable, a chance to finally experience Slint in the flesh. And yet, it was February, very cold, a weird vibe, very odd crowd, and a patchy bill. Slint were outstanding, but the rest of the weekend was kind of flat and uninspiring, all bar one or two acts. Oh, and we all got the flu and had to drive back to Norwich in a haze of mounting sickness and fever. Quickly then through this year's other records, starting with the debut from Norwich friends and sometime bill sharers, Sennen, and their album Widows. Yeah, a bit shoegaze, a bit post-rock, but with a melodic chops, vocal harmonies, and a knack for grafting softer textures onto heavier tunes. Rumour has it that they're back in the saddle, so, you know, keep your eyes peeled. Next, Shipping News and Flies the Fields, their last full studio album. The live One Less Heartless to Fear emerged in 2010, shortly after Jason Noble's cancer diagnosis. And that was the actual final recording before his tragic passing in 2012. I'm still not sure they ever quite surpassed their 1997 debut Save Everything, but this is still fine stuff. A shade more muscular and direct than Jeff and Jason's other endeavours, but with supple shifts and moody dynamics aplenty. One of those constants next, those bands who keep showing up in these videos without ever bagging my top pick, their time will come. It's Low and The Great Destroyer. They've been softening us up with louder, more rocking tracks over the preceding few albums, thinking stuff like Dinosaur Act or Canada. But this was a fuller, bigger, more widescreen album in its entirety. But alongside the Monkeys and Californias sit more typical, insidiously devastating numbers like the amazing Silver Rider, the Crazy Horse Explosion closing out When I Go Deaf, and the downbeat hymn to creativity that is Death of a Salesman. A bigger sounding, more produced record than Low had made before, but everything you love about them is still there. This year for me though is all about that balance between electronics and guitars. And almost there was the debut self-titled album from LCD Soundsystem. Downtown New York cool smashing post-punk and new wave guitars into garage and acid house beats and filter sweeps. You can criticise James Murphy's magpie tendencies for sailing extremely close to pastiche, plagiary even, but that sampler's ear he has for a whole aesthetic or vibe is very, very tastefully deployed. There's lots going on, a little too much in places, but when it works, it really works. Daft Punk is playing at my house, Losing My Edge, Tribulations, Disco Infiltrator, and Beat Connection to start with. A great debut, a great album, full stop, but they'd get even better, if you can believe that. Instead, for 2005, I'm going for a band who'd been evolving towards an electronic rock hybrid over the course of much of the 90s, taking their sweet time, a very organic process of incorporation and assimilation, a million miles away from the instantaneous dance floor pileup of LCD. And this album would be, to this day, pretty much the last thing we'd ever hear from them. This is Hood and Outside Closer. Essentially the brainchild of Leeds duo brothers Chris and Richard Adams, supplemented by a revolving cast of musicians since their inception way back in 1990. And for those with terminally short attention spans out there, I've seen the analytics, I know who you are. Consider Hood the rural, the pastoral bark psychosis. There you go, a pithy one-liner for all the serial skippers. Both Bark Psychosis and Hood had very similar origins and trajectories, coming out of the dreamy noise indie pop explosion at the tail of the 80s, lo-fi, bedroom multi-track beginnings, adopting dubbier, quietly psychedelic traits, incorporating environmental sounds, and finding themselves increasingly drawn to more studio-based constructions and leaning into the technology of the day. In the case of Bark Psychosis, that final step was only truly made as they ruptured with Graham Sutton going full drum and bass via his Boomerang project. Hood, however, took the long way around, never ditching their guitars, but picking up new collaborators and techniques along the way, stuffing their toolbox with all the tricks you hear played out on Outside Closer. The earlier stuff, up to maybe 95 or thereabouts, is very much a kind of British take on mid-90s shoegaze influenced lo-fi. Albums like Silent 88 and Cabled Linear Traction. But their switch to the Domino label with 1998's Rustic Houses, Forlorn Valleys saw a band that was clearly responding to the first wave of UK post-rock. Extended songs, jazzy drums, found sounds, wind instruments, and a strong sense of place and environment in their compositions. The seasons, light, weather, topography all feature very strongly in their titles and lyrics of this period. Synthetic Beats made an appearance on the Home Is Where It Hurts single early in 2001, but by the year's end, the Cold House LP, it showed a band making a huge leap. Glitchy, chopped up beats playing off the increasingly folky music and guest spots from MCs, Dose One and Y, of avant hip-hop collective Anticon. But for me, Outside Closer just pips it, because its new sounds just feel so natural, so integrated into the English folk foundation that was underpinning many of their songs and arrangements. Cold House sounded like all the elements being assembled very successfully, but Outside Closer sounds grown. The flashes and touches combining organically without ever drawing attention to themselves. It never sounds like they're going dance or having a rap section in the way a lot of indie dance floor crossovers of the 90s did. It is, however, a cousin to Hex, a country cousin, all long damp walks on the moors, lonely reflections and contemplations open to the elements and the influences of the land. But song highlights, there's the swaying, sorrowful barn dance of the Negatives, swirling pipes, accordion horns, strings, a wonderful, romantic, melancholic opener. There isn't any space for love anymore. And if you know the feeling, then you need to go to the furthest place from your house, stand there a while, make sure you're broke. The interplay of glitchy beats and acoustic picking on any hopeful thoughts arrive is mesmeric. The breathy, broken vocals and brass are just the icing on the cake. The deathly hand claps and massed vocals of End of One Train Working conjure a brooding sense of solitude, of loss, of thwarted, ghostly frustration. The dubby, fractured Winter 72 is all tail-chasing echoes and submerged drums. And the big single, The Lost You, that opening ear hook, that glitchy loop sample, it's actually Robert Wyatt, a vocal sample from his old Rotten Hat album. A clear link to the more overt production style of Cold House, I think, but a killer single nonetheless. Then there's the tumbling, descending piano run and tangled drums of Fading Hills. A gorgeous, ebbing, oozing sigh, collapsing into little granular vocal loops at the end. It's lovely. And finally, closure, 7.5 minutes, foggy piano chords, lonesome trumpet, and a drum pattern snapping viciously at that closing hi-hat. Strings and vocals combining beautifully in a keening lost love lament. It's a wonderfully sad, romantic sounding record, light years from clinical post-rock math lessons or for avant's sake posturing. A 21st century channeling of 19th century Northern Gothic writing is in there somewhere maybe. Doomed lovers, broken skies, lightless valleys, landscapes imprisoning their inhabitants. Outside Closer is a real page-turner, which for me has become a kind of well-thumbed old friend, kind of like a book that you feel the need to share with others, which is exactly why it's my pick for 2005. Someone mentioned Hood in the comments a few videos back, and I kind of hinted that it was coming up, but there you go. Here it is. As ever, let's chat about this below the line. What do you think of this album if you know it? If not, what would your choice for 2005 be? As ever, you're here. It's the end of the video. Thanks very much for getting this far. And please think about giving it a like if you can. If you've subscribed, even better. All of those things really, really help the channel. And I will leave you there. I hope to see you again very soon. Please take care and bye for now.